The NDC was registered by INEC on February 5, 2026, barely 4 months ago. It had no elected official, no sitting governor, no legacy structure. And yet, on May 29, 2026, it conducted presidential, governorship, National Assembly, and State Assembly primaries simultaneously across all 36 states and the FCT, with voting centers recording high levels of participation and enthusiasm. A party that did not exist as a registered entity at the start of this year just ran the most talked about party primaries in Nigeria in a generation. A party that was registered 4 months ago just held primaries across every state in Nigeria, and the crowds that showed up were bigger than anything the Labour Party, NNPP or PDP produced at the same stage. Nobody in the mainstream is asking the question that actually matters. Is this a political movement, or is it a very well-managed illusion? Before this video is over, I am going to show you the one number from 2023 that explains exactly why the APC is not afraid of this yet, but should be. Before we go further, if you're new here, Niger Brief exists for one reason: to give Nigerians the political analysis that mainstream media won't. Whether you're in Abuja, Lagos, Kano, Port Harcourt, or London, this channel is for you. Hit subscribe and stay with me. This gets deeper. To understand what happened on May 29th, you need to understand the journey that led there. Peter Obi left the Labour Party. He joined the ADC, the African Democratic Congress, in March of 2026. Then he exited the ADC in May of 2026, citing what he called deep reflection and the worsening of the country. He formally joined the NDC. Rabiu Kwankwaso followed the same path. His camp cited internal challenges within the ADC and the urgency of political realignments. His spokesperson confirmed the exit was agreed unanimously after grassroots consultations. And here is the detail that matters most. Both men joined the NDC on the same day on a formal reception ceremony in Abuja, calling on members to avoid litigation and focus on national development. This was not coincidence. This was a coordinated entry designed to dominate the political news cycle, project unity, and give the NDC a single undeniable moment of national arrival. So, why now? Why the NDC? Why May 2026? Because the NDC primaries on May 28th and 29th were the first real test of whether this new coalition had organizational depth beyond press statements and rally crowds. Think about what was attempted in a single day: presidential affirmation, National Assembly primaries, State Assembly primaries, and governorship primaries, all across 37 territories simultaneously. Victor Ume moved the motion for Peter Obi's affirmation as presidential candidate, declaring the party, and I quote, united in accordance with its constitution. Ovi Umwageje seconded the motion, expressing in his own words hope, excitement, and great expectation. Kwankwaso accepted his ratification as vice presidential candidate on X, describing himself particularly humbled and deeply honored by the selection. Name the moment for what it is. The NDC primaries are the point where a political alliance stopped being speculation and became a formal electoral machine. Now, before we get to who benefits and who loses, we need to understand the legal and institutional ground on which this whole structure stands, because there are serious questions about how this party was born, and those questions have not gone away.
The NDC secured its registration on February 5, 2026, after a prolonged legal battle that began not in 2025 or 2024, but in 2017. Its approval followed a ruling by the Federal High Court directing INEC to recognize the party. This places the NDC in a specific and important category: parties that emerged through judicial intervention rather than through fresh grassroots mobilization applying through the administrative process. And that distinction matters constitutionally and strategically. Under the Nigerian Constitution and the Electoral Act, INEC has the regulatory mandate to register political parties through an administrative screening process. A chieftain of the All Democratic Alliance raised this concern publicly, questioning the process that led to the NDC's registration and arguing that the party was not part of the official screening stages conducted by the electoral body. INEC complied with a court order, but compliance under judicial direction is legally and politically different from voluntary administrative approval. What does that mean in practical terms? It means that if any of the NDC's primary outcomes or eventually election results are challenged in court, opponents could return to the foundational question of the party's registration legitimacy. This is not hypothetical. Nigerian courts have set aside election outcomes on far less consequential procedural grounds. Now, the NDC primaries were confirmed as conducted in line with the Electoral Act and the party's constitution. INEC officials and security agencies were present to monitor proceedings. That monitoring matters. It provides a paper trail that can either protect or expose the party in future litigation. But here is something I want you to hold in your mind as this story develops. As of June 3, 2026, that is 4 full days after the primaries concluded, the NDC had still not officially announced the results of its governorship and legislative primaries. Aspirants were waiting in the FCT. Uncertainty was hanging over outcomes in multiple states. A party conducting what its own supporters are calling the most credible primaries in opposition history should not still be withholding results 4 days later. This gap between the narrative being sold and the operational reality on the ground is something every serious observer needs to track carefully as this story develops. And there is a direct legal consequence to that delay. The Electoral Act provisions on party primaries require results to be submitted to INEC within a defined window for candidate sponsorship. Delayed announcement is not just a party management issue, it is a compliance risk with direct consequences for candidate eligibility. There is a specific legal window the NDC must meet to submit its full candidate list to INEC. I will tell you exactly what that deadline means and what it could cost them near the end of this video. The institutions set the boundaries. Now let us talk about the people operating within those boundaries and what each of them actually wants from this arrangement.
Who loses? Obi and Kwankwaso's exit from the ADC left Atiku Abubakar and Rotimi Amaechi in that platform. And here is the tragedy, the structural tragedy of the Nigerian opposition. With a fragmented opposition that will split the vote between multiple candidates, the ruling APC is well positioned to win the 2027 presidential race the same way it won in 2023, with less than 37% of the vote. They understand this arithmetic, and they still cannot hold together. The ADC as a coalition project is also weakened. Obi's exit reduces its appeal among young voters and obedient supporters and undercuts the original argument that the ADC could unite Nigeria's major opposition blocs into a single competitive challenge. The 2027 electoral math. Now the 2023 math, and this is critical. Peter Obi secured the majority of votes in 11 states and the Federal Capital Territory, with approximately 6.1 million votes nationally. Kwankwaso won 38 of 44 local government areas in Kano State alone, with nearly 1.5 million votes. On paper, this combination combines the Southeast and South-South youth-urban base with Northwest structural depth. If that combination holds, and that "if" is doing enormous work in that sentence, it covers 2 of the 4 critical vote blocks needed to win a presidential election in Nigeria. The government's response is itself a data point. The presidency's response to Obi's NDC move was to call him a, quote, political nomad. Presidential spokesman Bayo Onanuga dismissed Obi's justification as illogical musings and said, in his own words, "Welcome, Peter, to the 2027 race." That response, mocking rather than engaging, dismissive rather than alarmed, is the response of an administration that is not yet treating this as a serious threat. The question is whether the NDC can convert crowd size into voter registration and voter registration into ballots cast and, critically, ballots counted. Nigeria map highlighting each zone as it is discussed. Northwest, Kwankwaso's Kano machine is the spine of this region's contribution.
The question is whether his influence has survived his NNPP years and the political volatility that has defined Kano state politics in recent cycles. Northeast and North Central. Senator Aishatu Binani of Adamawa State has formally joined the NDC, signaling an attempt to build credibility in the Northeast beyond Kwankwaso's traditional zone. Southeast. Obi is the strongest southeastern political figure not currently inside the APC or PDP structure. His presence anchors the NDC in this zone, but APGA remains a complicating factor for state-level races where party loyalty runs deeper than presidential preference. South-South. Dixon's NDC leadership provides an anchor, but the region remains fluid, with multiple loyalties and no single dominant bloc. Southwest. The NDC's appeal here will depend entirely on whether the obedient energy from 2023 can be reactivated in a zone where Tinubu's political machine is most concentrated and, some would argue, most vulnerable to an organized, unified opposition. And then there is the silent stakeholder that nobody in the establishment is discussing seriously enough: the obedient movement. That base has been moved across 3 parties in 3 years. Whether it follows the man, Peter Obi, or the principle, a clean break from the 2-party establishment, is the single most unresolved question of the 2027 cycle.
Let us talk about what this means beyond the presidential race. The NDC primaries included governorship candidates in states across all 6 zones. If those candidates are formally ratified and sponsored, the NDC will become the first new party since the return of democracy to field candidates at state executive level as a serious opposition force in its very first election cycle. That changes the competitive map for state-level politics in ways that extend well beyond who sits in Aso Rock. On the economy, the NDC's reform rhetoric speaks directly to what Peter Obi has consistently argued, that Nigeria's crisis is fundamentally one of governance quality and budget prioritization. At the Obedient Conference in Uyo, Obi declared, "The state of our nation and the urgent need to save Nigeria informed my decision to move parties." Whether that framing translates into a concrete economic program that differs meaningfully from the APC's current approach is something the NDC has not yet fully articulated. Crowd energy is not a fiscal plan. Voters need specifics, not slogans. On the inter-ethnic and interfaith dimension, the Obi-Kwankwaso ticket is a deliberate pairing of a Southeast Igbo Christian with a Northwest Hausa Fulani Muslim. This is not accidental. It is the same structural formula that produced the Obi-Dati ticket in 2023. Its symbolic resonance is real, but symbolism alone did not win in 2023, and symbolism alone will not win in 2027 without structural delivery. On security and electoral integrity, a credible opposition with national reach and a coherent campaign machine is itself a check on state-sponsored electoral manipulation. The NDC's commitment to direct primaries, putting votes in the hands of grassroots members, is a structural choice with democratic implications. But consider this. In Enugu, some aspirants reported waiting for hours at primary venues without officials arriving. Videos of party members waiting endlessly circulated on social media. If the NDC cannot manage its own internal process cleanly, it will be in a weak position to credibly challenge INEC's management of the general election. And the deeper precedent, a new party conducting nationwide primaries with INEC monitoring, security agency presence, and nationwide crowd turnout is a signal. It signals that the 2023 Labour Party groundswell was not a one-off anomaly. Nigerian voters, particularly young ones, are willing to invest in new platforms. That is a structural shift in political culture, regardless of what happens specifically to the NDC. Now, let us zoom out, because what is happening in Nigeria right now is not just a Nigerian story, and the people watching it most carefully are not in Abuja or Lagos.
No formal US, UK, or EU government statement has been made specifically about the NDC ticket as of this recording. But Nigeria's 2027 election cycle is firmly on the radar of democratic monitoring organizations, particularly after the 2023 election controversy that produced extensive documentation from Yaga Africa, the Situation Room, and multiple international observer missions. The NDC's direct primaries model, if it holds, will draw favorable commentary from democracy promotion bodies. That matters for soft power, for international legitimacy, and for the terms on which future aid and investment discussions are conducted. An Obi-led government would likely represent a reset in Nigeria's relationship with Western governments, on the optics level. Obi's economic philosophy, productivity over consumption, anti-subsidy, human capital-led growth, is broadly aligned with IMF and World Bank governance priorities, in a context where Nigeria's fiscal position makes concessional lending terms increasingly relevant. That alignment is not a small thing. For the diaspora, and I know many of you watching this are outside Nigeria, the NDC primary is significant on three levels. First, the obedient movement was substantially funded and amplified from the diaspora in 2023. That infrastructure still exists, and it is already being reactivated. Second, remittances now exceed $20 billion annually and constitute Nigeria's largest source of foreign exchange. They flow disproportionately from the educated urban professional class that forms the core Obi voter base. The political engagement of the diaspora is not separable from its economic relationship with the country. Third, for diaspora Nigerians watching Nigeria's governance crisis in real time, the naira free fall, fuel price volatility, security deterioration, the NDC ticket represents the clearest alternative on offer right now. The question they are asking is not whether to support it emotionally, it is whether to invest financially and organizationally, given how 2023 ended. One final observation. What scholars of democracy call opposition coordination failure is the single biggest gift an incumbent government can receive. Nigeria's opposition has demonstrated this failure serially. The NDC is the latest attempt to break that cycle. Whether it succeeds will be studied beyond Nigeria's borders. The strongest case for skepticism. The APC's Rolling Stone critique of Peter Obi is not simply political mudslinging. It contains a structural observation that deserves serious engagement. Peter Obi has now been in ABGA, the PDP, the Labour Party, the ADC, and now the NDC within a single decade. The steel-manned version of this argument is, if Peter Obi cannot build durable institutional loyalty within a party structure, what assurance does any voter have that an Obi administration would build durable institutions for the country? It is a fair question. The rebuttal. The weakness in that argument is that it conflates the dysfunction of Nigerian party structures with the character of individual politicians. The Labour Party was factionalized by court orders and internal warfare that had nothing to do with Obi's governance approach or decisions. The ADC was structurally compromised by competing factions at the leadership level before Obi formally arrived. Criticizing Obi for leaving damaged platforms is equivalent to criticizing a passenger for exiting a bus that caught fire. The more relevant question is not which buses he has been on, it is whether the NDC itself is structurally sound, and that question is still being answered. Misconceptions circulating on social media. Misconception 1. The massive crowd at primaries means the NDC will win 2027. Crowd size and votes cast are not the same variable. In 2023, Labour Party rallies in Lagos were among the largest political gatherings in the city's recent history. Tinubu still won Lagos by a significant margin. Crowd energy is a necessary but insufficient condition for electoral victory. Misconception 2. The fake primary results prove the NDC is already rigging its own elections. The NDC clarified that results were circulating online before the primaries had even held, making them, in the party's own words, impossible and illogical.
Pre-primary leaks are a different problem from post-primary manipulation. They do, however, raise serious questions about the party's information management discipline. Misconception 3. Kwankwaso will abandon the ticket before 2027. Kwankwaso has formally accepted the ratification and posted publicly on X affirming the arrangement. Breaking that publicly would be politically costly in a way that earlier private speculation was not. He is now formally bound. The real question is whether the partnership survives the sustained pressure of a real campaign, not whether it exists on paper. The NDC's delayed announcement of primary results itself is a test of institutional credibility. As of today, aspirants remain in the FCT awaiting official results. At least one governorship aspirant in Enugu has gone public dismissing speculation that outcomes could be altered after the fact. The NDC leadership controlling the information flow centrally is either a sign of disciplined process management or the beginning of the same NWC versus state chapter disputes that destroyed the Labour Party internally. Which one it is will be clear within days.
3 most likely next moves. First, the NDC formally announces all primary results and submits them to INEC. The Electoral Act timeline for candidate submission is the first hard deadline this party must meet. Watch for whether the NDC meets this deadline cleanly or files for an extension. The latter would be an early signal of operational weakness that goes beyond optics. Second, the APC and PDP begin targeted legal challenges. The NDC's court-ordered registration means the legal surface area for challenge is larger than for parties with clean administrative registration histories. Expect pre-election court filings aimed specifically at the presidential ticket. Third, the Atiku ADC versus Obi NDC split deepens. With a fragmented opposition, the APC's advantage is structural, and this brings us to the number I promised you at the start of this video. The APC won the 2023 presidential election with less than 37% of the vote. 37%. In a two-candidate or two-dominant candidate race, 37% loses. The APC's entire 2027 strategy depends on keeping the opposition fragmented. And here is the paradox. The NDC's emergence may actually deepen that fragmentation rather than heal it, because Atiku is still in the ADC and that vote will not go to Obi. Signals to watch. Watch for 4 things. 1. Whether the NDC officially announces all governorship and legislative results by June the 7th, the first real test of NWC discipline. 2. Whether any NDC governorship aspirant files a court challenge, the first sign of internal fracture replicating the Labour Party pattern. 3. Whether the obedient movement formally endorses and integrates into NDC structures or continues operating as a parallel entity outside the party's formal chain of command. 4. The APC's concrete electoral response. Are they worried enough to deploy state resources against NDC candidates in the southeast, or are they treating this as a low-priority threat? The Electoral Act requires parties to submit candidate names to INEC at least 180 days before a general election. If the 2027 elections follow the February schedule of 2023, the submission window opens within the next 6 to 8 months. The NDC must have clean, ratified, uncontested candidate lists by that point or face disqualification challenges that could remove candidates from the ballot entirely. Given the current result announcement delay, this is not a theoretical risk, it is a live one. And the long-term impact, regardless of the result, if the NDC ticket holds and campaigns effectively through 2027, the structural consequence, win or lose, is the consolidation of a viable second opposition force in Nigerian politics. Even a strong second-place finish, combined with strong governorship performances, changes the incentive structure for future coalition building. That matters for the long game, not just for 2027. We began with a question. Is the NDC a political movement or a well-managed illusion? The honest answer, 4 months into this party's existence, is it is not yet fully either. What it is right now is a coalition of credible electoral forces. Obi's national youth base, Kwankwaso's northern structure, Dixon's South-South establishment credibility, and a new party infrastructure that passed the first primary test in terms of national reach. whether those forces can stay coherent under the pressure of a real campaign, whether they can deliver clean candidate lists to INEC, hold together through the result delays and the inevitable court challenges, that is what turns a coalition into a movement. What should ordinary Nigerians do right now? Verify your voter registration. Watch the NDC's official result announcement in the coming days and hold every party, including the NDC, to the same standard of transparency and internal democracy they are demanding from the APC. The measure of a reform platform is not its rally crowds, it is how it handles power when no one is watching. If this analysis gave you clarity, share it with one person who needs to understand what is really happening in Nigeria. Like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.